Since 2015, Pop Health Podcast has brought to you some of the best minds in healthcare, including leaders from government, not-for-profit, and investor-backed powerhouses, as they share successes, failures, and how our audience can move forward in today's constantly evolving healthcare world. Thank you for joining us for today's episode presented by 24 Hour Home Care.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Pop Health Podcast. I'm Gavin Ward, host of Pop Health Podcast. In today's episode, I had the opportunity to sit down with Bo Henneman, who serves as the Regional Vice President for Performance and Local Plan Engagement with Anthem Blue Cross, specifically with a focus on the Medi-Cal population. In today's episode, we learn how Bo, who originally grew up in Missouri, got a degree in marketing and made his way out to California and ended up working with a temp agency through the In-Home Support Services program here in LA County. That was the spark and start of his career in healthcare. In today's episode, we learn how Bo ultimately became an expert in Medi-Cal and is seen as a leader throughout the state of California with the CalAIM initiative, where he helps lead Anthem's team, serving 1.5 million members in their Medi-Cal bucket, if you will, for the Elevance Health brand of companies. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Feel free to check out other episodes of Pop Health Podcast by visiting us at pophealthpodcast.com, checking out our YouTube channel, or listening to us wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy today's episode. Good morning, Bo. Thanks so much for joining the show today.
Good morning, Gavin. How's it going?
So far, so good. We're recording on a Friday and looking forward to a great weekend, but love the work I do. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Thank you.
Great. So, Bo, you may know on our shows, we typically like to get to know the guest a little bit before we jump into the meat and potatoes of our episode. And so for you, let's start off with maybe a fun fact, maybe something surprising about you that folks may not think would be connected to you.
Oh, man. I don't know. A fun fact or something people don't know. That's a tough one. You know, I don't know that I have a lot of hidden secrets or fun facts. Just typical guy. Got a wife, 2 kids, a dog. Maybe one thing that most people wouldn't know, which is kind of odd, is I live in the center of LA, and for about 10 years, we also had 3 chickens in our backyard. And not an experience that I would recommend to anyone necessarily. They were kind of a pain to deal with, and leave a mess everywhere. But at the same time, best eggs you'll ever eat come from home raised chickens. And so they've moved on. We did it in the middle of the city. It was my wife's idea, not mine. Although I'm the one who ended up doing all the work. And
oh yeah,
so it happens in the middle of the city. A lot of people don't know you can do that, but.
Yeah. And was there any roost? Did you ever have a rooster or no?
No, that the city won't let you have. They make too much noise. Yeah.
That's what I was going to wonder. Both my sister and my mom actually have chickens. And so I heard did they really lay eggs like once a day? Is that?
Once a day. Once a day. We had a overabundance giving them away. But yeah, they were good eggs.
I bet. That's awesome. Cool. So did you grow up in LA or where did you grow up?
I did not grow up in LA. I actually grew up in the Midwest in a pretty small town in the state of Missouri, in rural Missouri, a couple hours south of St. Louis.
Okay, great. So you grew up out there. Did you end up going to college out there as well? Or?
I did. I went to University of Missouri for my undergrad. When I graduated, and I got my car and drove across the country, and I've been in LA ever since. Okay,
so tell us, in school, what did you study?
I actually have a business degree, so I studied marketing, and at the time I don't regret that. It was a great degree and very fascinating, going through like all the different components of marketing, from marketing research to advertising and everything else. But it turns out when you graduate with a marketing degree, a lot of the jobs are sales, and that didn't do it for me. So I kind of pivoted and ended up in healthcare.
Okay, so tell us, so you're in Missouri, you study marketing, you get your degree. Mm-hmm. What attracted you to come out to LA?
Just wanted to get out of Missouri, to tell you the truth. I'd spent some time in college traveling around Europe and really wanted to experience different parts of the world, and graduated and had an opportunity to come out to the West Coast and thought it was going to be short term, and it had ended up being here for the long haul, it seems.
Okay, awesome. So a question for folks who've spent a bunch of time in one state and then now live elsewhere or have been elsewhere for a while. Where do your sports loyalties lie?
Well, so I am a diehard St. Louis Cardinals fan. That will never change. I am an LA Rams fan, but they were in St. Louis when I lived in Missouri, and so they eventually followed me here. But in terms of basketball and hockey, I stick with LA, the Clippers and the Kings. Those are my teams.
Go Kings, go! I know about those Cardinals. I'm a Dodger fan, and growing up, there was some good. Even though we're not maybe. I believe there's a rivalry. Some people may not agree with that, but Cardinals had our number. I've been to a few of those games, Cardinals versus Dodgers, and I can't remember the Blue ever winning. So
we had Kershaw's number for a while. So that's not easy to do to get to that guy. But
definitely not.
They were doing it for a long time.
I was going to say, unless it's playoffs, usually teams have better success. Playoffs. That's great. So you come out to LA, and how did you end up finding healthcare or connecting with healthcare?
Yeah, I kind of stumbled into it, to tell you the truth. When I came out to LA, after a few months, I was looking for a job and trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and started in just doing temp work, and through my temp work, I got assigned to the In-Home Supportive Services Public Authority in Los Angeles County. And, kind of came into it not having any idea what in-home supportive services is. For those who aren't familiar with that program, it is a home care program. It's the state's personal care attendant program, allows people who need assistance at home and who are on Medi-Cal to hire a family member, a friend, or a complete stranger to come in and help them out with their daily needs, right? And so, really started with that organization as the public authority model was just standing up in the state. Had no idea what it was, but quickly latched onto it and found, a lot of meaning and purpose in what I was doing on a day-to-day basis. And I think, what really stuck, the reason that I stuck with it and got so invested in it is, I had two grandparents growing up who had dementia, and spent many years in skilled nursing facilities, and they were in a locked unit in the skilled nursing facility, and they needed to be there. They'd gotten to the point where, they needed that level of care. But, the facility that they were in was kind of in the back of the locked unit was in the back of a nursing facility, right? So every time you go visit, you have to walk through the entire facility and really just experiencing like that walk every time of experiencing people who looked like they didn't really need to be there. Like if they had other types of support in their life, maybe they could have a better quality of life at that stage. And, that's what IHSS does, right? Like that's kind of the whole goal of that and the broader home and community-based services was to, support people and support their independence and allow them to live at home and as long as possible. And, that kind of always just like stuck with me. And, as I said at the beginning, I graduated and it's like all these jobs being a salesperson. And it's like, this is way better. This is something that has a positive impact on people. And so that's kind of how I got started. And then, obviously that's a big gap between that and what I do now at a managed care health plan. But, really the transition was when long-term services and support started getting integrated with managed care. I had an opportunity to, move from just working with IHSS to kind of this broader scope of services and really work on that integration within the healthcare system, which at that time was, two completely different siloed things that people were getting.
So what was your first, so you're at IHSS, which has a strong connection to the CalAIM initiative, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So when did you make that first move, or do you mind me asking where was next for you?
I spent some time working for LA Care Health Plan. And that was when the state, so I ended up at the public authority for almost 12 years. So, you start out as a temp and then all of a sudden 12 years has gone by and you're still there doing this work. But back about 11 years ago when the state started looking at that carve-in of long-term services and supports through the California Coordinated Care Initiative. That was the opportunity, because at that point, IHSS was part of that integration, and really seeing that as an opportunity, because really with IHSS, like every day we were doing a lot for people, right, and really supporting them in every way that we could, but there were so many gaps that couldn't be met through IHSS, and so I really saw a lot of promise in that integration in the broader healthcare delivery system. And had that opportunity to move into the managed care world and start looking at things more holistically and looking at bigger impacts on people. And so that was kind of the start of my managed care journey, and that was about 11 years ago, I think, when that happened.
Were you working in the tall building downtown or elsewhere?
I was working in the tall building downtown. Yeah, I was.
Yeah, that's great. I've been there before, and hard to find a lot of food spots within easy walking distance sometimes, but
yeah.
So you were at LA Care for a few years, and tell us, what was the opportunity that brought you to Anthem?
So when I came to Anthem, it was another wave of change, and I'm sure that's like a theme in your podcast, right? Because in California, we're constantly going through change, or at least have been over the last 5 or 10 years. At LA Care, spent time really building up their long-term services and supports program with a couple of other people, and started looking at things from, really just kind of initially looking at things like housing and food insecurity, which were things outside of the long-term services and support scope, and looking at, how do you start to integrate these things and pull all the pieces together. And that was about the time that the state started implementing the health homes pilots, as well as the whole person care pilots with the counties throughout the state. And so, Anthem had developed a position and started building a team to support those types of initiatives. And that's where the opportunity arose for me to continue growing within this field and really go from beyond just IHSS to LTSS, but looking at, this broader group of services. And so when I came on board with Anthem, which was about 7.5 years ago now, started with working on health homes, whole person care, looking at the integration of LTSS and a couple of other things along with it.
That's great. So I think a lot of us in healthcare, you're using these acronyms that I know understand, right? That that for you is like a language you're fluent in. One of the acronyms we hear out there is HCBS. And here in California, HCBS is, at least in my world, in my day job, is having a bigger role in more support, more funding, more integration. So what is HCBS, maybe in layman's terms? Yeah,
I usually think about it in a very broad definition, right? Because you're right, when HCBS, which is home and community-based services, is talked about in the state, a lot of times we connect it to certain Medicaid waiver programs, and we look at it from a funding source perspective, and types of services where you can pull down certain types of dollars from the federal government, and different things like that, right? But really, I think about it as really just this broad scope of services that are provided in the community that do what IHSS does, right? Is really support that person and their ability to stay living in their community safely, to get the support and services that they need. So they can age in place at home, and it's not just about aging in place. It's also about kind of the daily needs of an individual, regardless of age. And so I tend to think about this broad umbrella of services, which would include in-home supportive services. It would include some of the case management programs that we've stood up with community-based providers through CalAIM. It does include addressing food insecurity and housing needs, right? Services to support caregivers and support like that day-to-day personal care need that the person has. It's really, in my mind, like just this large bucket of services available in the community that somebody needs to get through through day-to-day living, right? So yeah, that's kind of how I always summarize it, but you're right. Like you can ask a whole bunch of different state agencies or federal agencies or different states, and they all have slightly different definitions. So I like to keep it pretty broad.
No, that makes sense. So in your role at Anthem, you kind of lead some of these initiatives and efforts. Can you tell us a little bit about your role today?
Yeah, my role today. So Anthem, for listeners who aren't familiar with Anthem Blue Cross, we are part of Elevance Health, which is a big national organization in the state of California. We do business under the Anthem Blue Cross name, and my role is specific to the Medi-Cal program in California. So today we have coverage in 29 counties, and we serve over 1.5 million members through the Medi-Cal program. And I do have responsibilities that are related to our quality management initiatives, to our local engagement efforts. So working closely with our county partners and other CBOs in the community to make sure we're meeting those local needs. Our community outreach and marketing efforts, I have oversight of those, as well as some of the incentive work that we do that's come on from CalAIM. Also spent a lot of time over the last several years standing up CalAIM. So, really working on that transition from health homes to the enhanced care management pilot, as well as, working with our team to stand up the community supports, which include a lot of those things that I mentioned under that HCBS bucket, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so 1.5 million members. I mean, you're clearly that's just on the Medi-Cal side. I really appreciate giving the kind of the Elevance Health umbrella and how Anthem has different business or lines of business, I guess you can say.
Mm-hmm. Right.
1.5 million members, and that's bigger than some states. So obviously
it is
a big importance as one of the larger providers here in California. So you mentioned you have marketing oversight. So, hey, that marketing degree, I mean, maybe it could come in handy.
It came back. It came back. Yeah, eventually.
Full circle. So one of the things, about your role is a phrase, local engagement. Mm-hmm. Can you help our audience understand when they hear the term like plan engagement or local engagement, what does that mean exactly from your role or lens?
Yeah, I mean, again, when you think about it, like I said, we're a big national organization, and I support our state level efforts, but California is a huge state, right? And, in the counties that we cover, there's a huge variance in needs and based on what the community needs, as well as resources in each one, right? So we have coverage. We partner with LA Care Health Plan to support Medi-Cal recipients in LA County. We have close to 500,000 members in LA County, and LA County is a lot of people and a lot of resources, right? Still a lot of needs in the community and areas where we're falling short, but very different than, say Alpine County or Inyo County, some of those rural communities that are mountain areas where, we may only have, anywhere from a few hundred members to a couple thousand members. And, the needs in those communities are very different, right? Yeah. Like at the core, like everybody from across the state seems to be, struggling with food insecurity and housing and homelessness. Although, you look at homelessness in Alpine County versus LA County, the numbers are very different. Oh, yeah. But the struggle is very similar, right? But how do you address those issues and who do you engage with and who are your community partners is very different from county to county. So when we talk about local engagement, it's really making sure that, our teams are engaging with local county officials. We're working closely with CBOs and other people in the community to really understand what the needs are of that specific community and figuring out how do we adjust our approach, right? How do we work in that community to meet the needs? Because again, very different from, LA County, where, you think of something like even access to care or access to services. LA County, like the biggest challenge is, well, you got 10 providers and, they're all within this 10-mile radius, but it could still take you an hour and a half to get to one, right? Because of traffic versus, some of our communities that are in the mountain region where, on the map, it's like, oh, well, this should be easy to get from here to here, and it's rural, so there's not going to be any traffic. No, but there's a big mountain in the middle of it, and the way you construct your network and the way you build out these programs and services has to look different, right? Yeah. So that's a big part of local engagement. I would say the other part for me, part of our strong focus is, local engagement isn't just making a couple of phone calls and giving out grants to say, hey, we support what you do. It's really being on the ground in those communities and focusing on being trusted partners, right? Because healthcare is complex. It's not up to managed care plans to solely, solve all of healthcare's issues across the state, right? It really requires working together with counties, with community-based partners, with the providers in our network, and those using those joint efforts to meet the needs of the Medi-Cal membership in that community. And so, really believe strongly that you have to be on the ground and be engaged and build trusted partnerships to do that. And so that's kind of what we focus on in terms of local engagement.
That's great. And I've seen it firsthand, and just I mentioned my day job earlier. I've seen your staff, on the ground in rural communities, bigger communities as well. And I am seeing those relationships. And one thing, just a shout out to Anthem and just the CalAIM initiative in general, is I used to think, the big bad health plans, national Anthem organization, it could be intimidating for providers, right? It could, especially folks who are new to being funded by the plans. And what I've found in my experience with Anthem and with other plans is when you guys say you're collaborative, you really are, right? And so for the folks listening who may work with Anthem or other CalAIM initiatives, the plans have been very collaborative, as has DHCS. And I've had to have a shift in my mind of, instead of being intimidated, they're like, wow, they're really receptive to what we have to say. So I think everything you're saying, I've seen it firsthand. Let's talk about the first year of CalAIM, our first 2 years, I should say, right? Because CalAIM, initially, my understanding was it was planned for 2021, but then COVID was a reason why I pushed back. I see you nodding. So 2022, we're almost done at 2023. In your couple of years, Bo, what would you say have been maybe some of the highlights or successes in the first couple of years?
Yeah. To tell you the truth, the first couple of years, it feels like it's been 20 years, but it also feels like it's gone by super fast. I can't believe we're already at the end of the second year. I think, the successes, sometimes honestly, we have to pause and look at the success, right? Because I think the first couple of years has really been a whirlwind. It started with focusing on at the beginning of 2022, okay, we've got these programs, health homes and whole person care, and they are going to go away. And we have members who are being served in those programs today, and we can't drop the ball on those members. We have to make sure that they can continue getting the support that they need, right? So that was kind of the primary focus. And then, over the course of that first year, expanding to other counties and, new populations of members and getting them engaged in these programs, right? It was really kind of, the reason I say it's kind of a whirlwind is it was taking, 5 years, 10 years of pilots and all these other different efforts and just saying, hey, let's move forward full steam and get this to everyone, right? And it's been a super heavy lift. So day in and day out, I think, and Anthem isn't unique to this. I think this is true of any health plan, as well as the providers and the community-based partners we're working with. Every day, it's a marathon just to work through like the operations and really, get things working as a well-oiled machine so that we can keep focusing on the individuals, right? And so sometimes you lose sight of the end result, but every once in a while we stop and we start talking about the people that we're serving and looking at the impact that we're having on their lives. And it immediately makes everything else go away, right? And to me, that's the best thing. Over the course of the first 2 years, looking at things like, okay, well, how many people did we successfully transition in the beginning? And how are the programs starting to grow, right? And you start listening to the member success stories of individuals who, were really struggling with their health and disconnected from care altogether, except for when they were going to the emergency room. And now they've kind of taken control of their lives, right? And gotten themselves in a much better place because of things we're doing in enhanced care management, or because some of the community supports that we're providing, or things like housing, the housing-based services, housing navigation. I've a couple of weeks ago, we were having this conversation, and we were doing housing pilots pre-CalAIM, smaller base pilots in a couple of counties, and getting a couple of people housed, but really experiencing some of the struggles in doing that, right? And a couple of weeks ago, we were having this conversation internally where we're trying to figure out some sort of operational issue. I don't remember what it was, but it's like one of those stumbling blocks along the way, right? And we're talking through it, and somebody from our team mentioned that our service coordinators, we're housing so many people, like the service coordinators are like having a competition. And it was like in the middle of this conversation, and I was like, wait, let's stop talking about all this other stuff and let's focus on that, right? And think about what you just said, because in our pilots, we struggled 10 years ago. Like there was no connection between housing and what health plans are doing, right? And now we're talking about, being able that we're housing so many people on a monthly basis, and we have so many people engaged in housing navigation that our team's turned it into a competition, right? And they're like keeping tallies and saying, look, I got more people housed than you did, and I've got better connections with my providers than you do. And like, that's amazing. We've come to that point at the end of 2 years. And to me, that's where the best success is, and that's not a result of our efforts, just our efforts at a health plan, right? Like that is directly like the partnerships that we have built and the relationships we've built with community-based organizations who were never working with health plans before, to be able to have those partnerships in place and see them working in such a, I guess, a successful and having those strong relationships just at the end of 2 years, which is, I mean, to me, it's just amazing, because this is something that could have taken 10 years to figure out and get to the point where, you're really at that kind of feel good moment of integration. And, I feel like we've been able to get there a lot quicker than anticipated.
That's fantastic. So usually it's you said quicker than anticipated. I know often it's a slow roll, and I'm sure there were moments of going slower than you wanted, or maybe utilization and people being aware of the benefits with CalAIM weren't where we wanted it as a collective, group in California wanted them to be. But it sounds like you've been pretty happy for the first 2 years. Now, you mentioned population. So just a reminder, or for folks who are not too familiar with the CalAIM initiative, when Bo says populations, part of the CalAIM initiative was to have the health plans and providers focus on certain what they call populations of focus. So, for example, that could be individuals that dealt with incarceration, or maybe labeled justice involved. It may be children and youth. So those are some examples, and I encourage you to listen to other episodes of Pop Health Podcast where we focus on the CalAIM and kind of break down CalAIM. In today's episode, we're not going to do that, but some of the things Bo is talking about can be picked up on in other episodes. So as we wrap up today's episode, Bo, what are you most looking forward to in 2024? Is there anything different in 2024 that you guys will be focused on or working on?
2024 is a big year. I think for health plans across the state, there are, a lot of changes in our relationship with the state and the expectations from the state. A lot of new expectations around how do you take all of these services that we've now built under CalAIM and how do you integrate that into our overall quality management programs, and how does that impact the quality of care that's being provided, right? Also, a lot of new focus on health equity and ensuring that, all members are getting the right level of care and the right types of services provided to them. And so I'm excited about those. I'm also excited. You mentioned the justice involved. I'm excited about that. I think, that's a population of focus that is going live in January. And, that's kind of a whole new level of integration. Like, How do we work with county jail and county probation? How do we work with the state prison system to make sure that people who are exiting those systems and have these, complex healthcare needs actually get the care that they need as they're transitioning out, which is a huge gap, right? So I'm excited about that. I think the other thing that I'm excited about, I don't know if you've done a podcast on this, it may be a future topic, but some of the movements around the state's data exchange framework expectations, and more integration with health information exchanges, more integration between the health plans and electronic medical record systems, more data sharing with counties, with other partners in the community. I mean, when we talk about all of these services now being more integrated. It's great that we've gotten to a point where, counties and health plans and community-based organizations aren't just operating in their own silos, right? We're trying to connect the dots and coordinate. But when you don't have the data being exchanged to do that, it makes it a lot more complex. And I think that, it's going to take several years to get to kind of the long-term vision of what data exchange is going to do. But it is going to break down a lot of barriers. And, I'll give you one quick example where data is so important. And I'm going to go back to the homeless population. I mentioned 10 years ago, in the health plan world, we weren't doing anything around homelessness. And I specifically remember, at one point and this was pre-Anthem, we thought, well, we've probably got some members who are experiencing homelessness and maybe we should get engaged. And so we went and we talked to the local continuum of care, which controls the homeless management information system, right? Which is, won't get too deep into the weeds and what that is, but it's data on people who are getting homeless services, right? Right. The point is, 10 years ago, it's like, but you're the health plan, like, you guys don't need this. Like, there's no connection, right? Over the course of the last year, through some of our work under CalAIM, we now have connection to the homeless information system, management information system in every one of our counties. And the ability that we have now to identify when our members are experiencing homelessness and to better connect to providers who are already serving them and figure out where are the gaps and what are the other things that we need to provide, it's made a huge difference, right? And we just started getting access to that data. And so you think about it like that's one component of data exchange and part of the vision, but I think it really illustrates the impact that more robust data exchange is going to have.
Yeah, I love the example you gave on the population of folks experiencing homelessness, because data, when you mentioned, have we done an episode on data? I wasn't going to say this out loud, but it can be a pretty dense.
Yeah, it can be.
But the example you gave, like you said, it illustrates the benefit. So maybe we'll do an episode. I'll need to have a lot of stories to make it exciting.
Right, right.
So just side note, we actually just did a rapid improvement event. Again, folks, podcast is just a very small percentage of my time. I have a day job too. And as I mentioned a couple times already, but we actually did do a 3-day rapid improvement event on how to get data in a place to deliver to the Anthems of the world, the monthly, all of that. So we haven't done an episode on it yet, but it's definitely like on my mind. And if you have a recommendation of someone who can make it fun, I might be interested. But we're going to wrap up now, Bo. I just want to say thank you so much. Folks, I got to see Bo. I've interacted with him just very briefly over the years. Saw him at a recent conference. He was, I think, getting food, and I interrupted him and asked if he'd consider being on the show. And you've been really kind to spend some time with us today, Bo. So if folks want to stay up to tune on what's happening with Anthem and the Medi-Cal initiative, are you active on LinkedIn, or is there a website? Should folks just go to the Anthem website? How can folks keep up to date on Anthem in California?
Yeah, good question. I mean, we are active on LinkedIn in general, and a couple of other of the social media platforms. Our website, definitely, that's a good starting point. We do have information on CalAIM and enhanced care management, community supports, and some of the other initiatives. Some of the things that we're working on may not be there yet, but they will be at some point. So those are good starting points.
Awesome, Bo. Well, hey, really, again, appreciate you being on the show today. And folks, again, feel free to check out other episodes on the Cal Name Initiative. We'll continue focusing on that in 2024 as well. Thanks again, Bo.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to another episode of Pop Health Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and if you have and want to check out other episodes, visit us at pophealthpodcast.com, iTunes or Apple Music, Spotify, Stitcher, and now YouTube as well. Take care.